everyone. So, for this week's reading, we actually looked at Charles Darwin's On the Origin Species, specifically chapters 3 and 4. And then we also looked at his later work, The Descendant of Man. Both are really influential scientific texts in the world today, and they were written around the mid 1800s. And they focus, both of them do, on explaining how life developed and changed over time. In Origin of Species, Darwin introduces the idea of natural selection, the idea that living things that are better adapted to their environment survive and will pass on those traits to the next generation, the stronger traits to the next generation. Basically, he's trying to explain how species evolve without needing direct, miraculous acts of creation. Then, in The Descendant of Man, Darwin takes that same concept and applies it to people, arguing that humans evolved from earlier animal forms. With that out of the way, the kinds of questions Darwin is dealing with are mostly scientific and political, but they also bring up a lot of theological and moral issues, especially when he talks about human origins and what makes us who we are. So, what is Darwin's main point? He's really trying to argue that all species, including human beings, came from earlier, simpler forms through a long process of change. And his big claim is that nature itself selects which traits survive, kind of like, almost like how like a farmer will select which animals to breed to get certain qualities, to get a better herd or a better crop. Except the way he's doing it is that it happens without any intentional design, without anybody orchestrating it. It just happens. In Descendant of Man, he argues that humans aren't separate creation, but a part of that same natural process, sharing a common ancestor with apes. He supports his idea with evidence from autonomy, fossils, and observations of both animals and plants. And he uses a lot of reasoning from nature, which is what we'd call inductive reasoning, to show how small changes can ultimately lead to a big difference over time. Now, with all that being said, from a Christian perspective, I think it was both interesting and challenging and a little bit fascinating to read, but not from the concept of agreeing with him, because I did not agree with him at all. It was more fascinating of how people can take simple things and spin such a big story from it. I mean, on one hand, his attention to detail and the way he studies creation, it's actually pretty amazing. And it reminds me of Psalm 19, where it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God." And I think science at its best is supposed to help us see the order and creativity in God's design, but not take over for it. And that's where I start to struggle with Darwin's conclusion that all this happens without any purpose or divine direction. As a Christian, I believe that human beings are made in the image of God because that's what the Bible says. We're not just advanced animals, but we're actually spiritual beings with souls and moral responsibilities that were created separately from the animals. And if everything about us came from just natural selection, then what gives us our sense of right and wrong, our longing for something, our desire for meaning, and ultimately that desire to chase after God? If we were chosen from natural selection, how come we don't see, animals nowadays, like apes nowadays, having that deductive reasoning, or how come they don't talk like we do? I think Darwin's theory explains how living things might adapt and survive, but it really does not explain why life exists in the first place, because that's something only God can explain. His focus on the physical and material causes is good, but it leaves out the spiritual dimension of everything. It's where faith steps in. Maybe evolution, I even hate to say it, but maybe it describes the process, but it's even wrong in that. We don't evolve, we adapt. And creation is what gives it the purpose of why everything is here. So if I had to pick something, I'd say his strength is the scientific insight and evidence that he produces, but his weakness really is in his theory when he tries to replace the idea of a creator instead of just describing how creation works in its entirety. So, to wrap up, I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions to think about. One, can the idea of evolution fit within a Christian view of creation where God still guides and sustains the process? And two, if humans are simply the result of natural selection, how do we explain our spiritual nature, like our ability to love, to create, and to seek after God? I think those questions are ones that we still wrestle with whether we're a believer or not, even today, especially in a world where science and faith are really seen as opposites and like can't work together, but ultimately they do. And it's how do we bridge that gap to bring them back together? I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this, and I'll see you guys next week.